Hey everybody, Halida Zweidler-McKay here with Engaging Leadership. I'm going to talk to you today about when failed experiments can actually fuel your growth. So I ran an experiment in my business last week that did not quite go as planned. I put out a special email that was outlining some amazing results that my clients have gotten recently, and I was so excited about that email and about those results that I wanted it to get noticed. So tried a little marketing trick where instead of just sending the content like I usually do, I created a file that people would have to click on to read. And then I wrote this sort of provocative cover note that was frankly designed to be clickbait that would draw people to the message. Now, at the time when I was doing this, it felt a little funny. I knew I was pushing the envelope, but I also know that putting myself out there is one of the things that I'm trying to work on. So I went for it, and it was an experiment. Now, here's the thing. Any growth, any development, anytime we're going to move from where we are now to somewhere new is going to require some experimentation. If we keep doing things the way we've always done them, there's no new input, there's no growth, there's no development, and we stagnate. And you can see this with companies that get stuck in their old ways of doing business or fail to adjust to changing conditions. And Blockbuster, like all these different business models that have gone away, right? Years ago, I read a great book about that, and I actually had an opportunity to do a project with the author. The book was called The Icarus Paradox, and the author was Professor Danny Miller. And the core idea is that companies that got really successful could too easily become stuck in their ways, like stuck in doing things the way they've always done them because that's what worked. But just like Icarus in the myth, that high flight led to their downfall. Because they would cling so tightly to what had worked in the past, they didn't adjust when the market changed, and that earlier success truly became their downfall. Now, what's tricky about experiments is that when we're trying these new things and we're pushing the boundaries so that we can learn and grow and develop, sometimes they fail. In fact, if you talk to any scientist, they'll tell you experiments will tend to fail more often than they work out, but you learn something along the way. And that's what happened with my experiment. It wasn't exactly a failure. I mean, several people did click on the link to get to the letter and a few booked calls with me. So from that perspective, it worked. But several more, particularly friends and family members who are on my mailing list, reached out with some real genuine concern. They were worried that my email account had been hacked and that someone was using my mailing list for a fishing expedition. And to say that I was embarrassed would be a major understatement because it was mortifying to learn that my friends and family members who know me had been put off, or inconvenienced by feeling like they had to reach out to me to tell me that this thing had happened. And I can only imagine if that's how my friends and family felt about it. People on my mailing list who don't even know me, probably had a whole different impression. So if you're one of those people, I am truly sorry for the concern and the inconvenience that email caused. Which brings me to what I learned, which has to do with how the experiments that you might run in your business or in your career or in your life can help you clarify your culture and your values. It's one of the core values of my business to provide value, whether that's to my clients or the people on my mailing list, the people who are in my Facebook groups, the people I speak with on the phone. And it's also a core value of mine to do that with integrity, with plain speaking, not to resort to tricks or gimmicks. And that's where this particular experiment kind of went off the rails. That was the niggle that I had about it when I sent out the email. And now, thanks to that email, that particular value has been reinforced for me. I know where I stand on sending clickbait messages, which is I don't want to do them. And I know that that may work for other businesses and other coaches, but now I can say even more clearly with more conviction that that's not a fit for me in my business. And that feels really good to get to that kind of clarity. So sometimes clarifying what we want, how we want to show up in the world requires that we shake things up a bit, that we try things out, that we test the boundaries. And in doing that, we can see the difference between what's a developmental step that's sort of taking us into some uncomfortable territory just because it's new to us, and what's the uncomfortable territory that really doesn't fit with who we are. Now, for that to work, you have to have an unshakable belief that failure is not an option, but with a new twist on that phrase. So it's not that failure is not an option because you're not allowed to stumble, you're not allowed to fail, it's not okay to fail. It's that failure is not an option because you're going to be focused on the learning. Failure is not an option if you refuse to define the results of whatever your experiments are as a failure. You clean it up, you apologize, you make it right, and you focus on what you learned. Now, in these days, as we're continuing to work our way through the pandemic and we're figuring out what life is going to look like back at work or on the other side, as people are going back to school, there's all these experiments going on. And I invite you to be running a few of your own. Try out different ways of working, test out different approaches to solving problems, try out different ways of communicating or interacting with your colleagues. And as you do, be sure you're collecting the data so you know what's working and what's not, and that you're focusing on the learning. What happened in the experiment? What parts came naturally? What parts were a bit awkward? And were they awkward because you're new at it or because something truly didn't fit with who you mean to be? The more you're out in the world trying new things, the more you can learn and grow and discover what really matters to you. And if you can do that in a way that can accept those experiments and accept that they won't always go the way you planned them, the more you're going to be reinforcing a culture inside yourself where failure isn't a thing. And that's extraordinarily freeing. So if you've been feeling stuck in your career, you don't yet have the confidence to run the kind of experiments that are going to get you unstuck, let's talk about it. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and we'll map out some concrete next steps that you can take to get unstuck and to get on the path to what you want. I promise it'll be one of the best hours you've spent on your career. You can schedule the call by going to zmcoach.net/call. I'm wishing you a great week. I'll see you next week. Wonder what our next experiment will be.